We were both grounded while the Internal Affairs Division finished their investigation, and I was really bored. Since I had some free time, I decided to stop by my house on the way. Helen had made a great brisket for dinner the night before, and I thought I could turn the leftovers into a sandwich for lunch. It was only a couple of blocks out of my route, and I figured no one at the precinct would mind if I took a little longer. As I drove slowly down my street, I stopped in front of Mrs. Ferguson's house to admire her beautiful flower garden. She worked hard on it for most of the year, and it always looked amazing. Just as I was about to drive the last little bit to my own house, I noticed a man coming out of my front door. It was Mark Malchek, a guy from around the corner who worked from home. What was he doing at my house at 11:30 in the morning? I watched as he walked around the corner and disappeared from view, and then I pulled up in front of my house and went inside. The house was quiet, but I thought I heard the shower running upstairs. As I climbed the stairs and entered my bedroom, I was hit with a strong surprise. The bed looked a mess, with pillows and sheets everywhere, and there was a big wet spot in the middle. The room had a strange smell, and it became clear what Mark had been doing in my home. The shower was on in the bathroom, and I could hear Helen singing softly to herself, which she often did when she was happy. I felt anger rising inside me, mixed with complete shock. How could my wife be with someone else, a neighbor no less, without me knowing? Helen and I had been married for 24 years, and I thought we were quite happy. We met when I was still in the police academy. She was helping with catering at my cousin's wedding, and I thought she was the prettiest girl I had ever seen. After getting her number, we dated for about a year before getting married. In many ways, our marriage was wonderful. I worked for the police department while Helen continued in the catering business, doing freelance work for a friend from high school. This flexible schedule allowed her to be a great mom to our two daughters, Linda and Veronica. Linda had just finished college and was working in Chicago, while Veronica was a junior in college. Helen was a wonderful mother to our terrific kids. We were deeply committed to each other, sharing the same values and a love for family. We enjoyed spending time together. Whenever we met other couples who seemed bored, we would exchange proud smiles. After 2 decades together, we still found joy in each other's company and could talk for hours. I often felt blessed, but there was one issue. That issue was intimacy. Helen is attractive, and I remember feeling thrilled the first time I saw her without clothes after dating for several months. However, she didn't have a strong interest in being intimate. After our early days of marriage, I realized that she was comfortable with being intimate about every 10 days or so. This was a big change from the 3 to 4 times a week we had started with, and I wasn't shy about expressing my feelings. Over the years, we faced this challenge more than any other. When our daughters were young, we even saw a marriage counselor for help. After a long period of frustration, I understood that Helen truly loved me. Her lower interest in intimacy wasn't directed at me, she just didn't have a high desire for it. The counselor helped me manage my feelings and encouraged Helen to be more engaged. Eventually, our frequency improved to about once a week, sometimes twice if I could encourage her. I hoped that as our girls went off to college and we had more free time, things might improve, but that didn't happen. What made it harder was that when we were intimate, it often felt rushed. I wanted to take my time, to show affection, and to appreciate her. However, she would often close herself off, saying, "Not tonight, honey, can we just keep it simple?" So with a sigh, I would prepare, and we would move forward with it. It wasn't that I disliked being close, but it felt like a long time between moments of connection where we savored each other. Many times we were intimate without me getting a chance to explore or touch her in ways that felt meaningful, and some aspects like oral intimacy were rare. Although I was willing to show my affection this way, it usually didn't happen. In 25 years, it only occurred a few times and for a short duration. You might wonder why I don't just walk away if I feel this way. The truth is, Helen loves me, and I love her. She shows me every day, in countless small ways, how much I mean to her and how much she cares. We both look forward to growing old together. However, she is not interested in intimacy. Over the years, I've learned to cope with this. So when I walked down the stairs and stepped out the front door, I was shocked and angry. I knew Helen loved me, and I completely trusted her loyalty. She just wasn't interested enough in intimacy to be unfaithful. So why was I feeling this way? It took me just 3 minutes to reach Mark Malchek's house and ring his doorbell. When he opened the door a crack, looking unsure, he said, "Hi, Rob. What are you?" I pushed the door hard against him, causing him to stumble. I stepped inside and pulled him back up, letting him know I was serious. He looked scared and couldn't find the words to speak. I grabbed his shirt collar with one hand and gave him a few stern slaps. I was careful not to hurt my hand while making sure he felt my anger. I ended with a hard push on his nose, which made him bleed. I pushed Mark onto his sofa and watched as he struggled to breathe. I placed my hand softly around his neck. "Listen carefully," I said firmly. "I know exactly where you were this morning, and I'm not at all happy about it." He didn't say anything. He just looked at me with fear. "Now you're going to tell me everything I want to know and answer every question I have. Then you will clean yourself up and continue with your life, and you will never speak to Helen again. Do you understand me?" I tightened my grip a little to ensure he was listening, and he quickly nodded. Yes, Rob, I understand," he said in a shaky voice. He was completely intimidated. I released him and made it clear he needed to talk. He better not leave anything out, and he shared everything. He and Helen had been seeing each other for more than 2 months. I was shocked to hear he said she started it. At a neighborhood party on the 4th of July, she was very flirty with him when no one else was around. A few days later, she called him in the morning and asked him to come over to help her move something. When he arrived, she was dressed in a short robe and greeted him with thanks and a kiss. During the kiss, she wrapped herself around him, making it clear she wanted to be close. Before he could say much more than, "Are you sure we should be doing this?" They were in our bedroom, and her robe was off. He was staring at her, amazed. She quickly took off his clothes, and they spent a long time together. I wanted to know everything about their first time and what happened after. I was shocked to learn that she was very vocal and seemed to enjoy herself a lot. She even asked him to try different ways, saying she liked it that way. Mark told me he repeatedly asked her, "Are you sure this is okay? What about Rob?" He claimed she said she could keep it a secret from me. Since that first meeting, they had been seeing each other a few times a week, whether in my bedroom or at Mark's home. They tried many different things together. Once, he said she wanted him to tie her up, and she really enjoyed it. This morning, he said, when I arrived at her house, she opened the door wearing just a lacy black bra and some pearls. We went upstairs, and she wanted me to please her first for about 20 minutes. She seemed to enjoy it a lot. Then we tried another position, and after that, she helped me get ready for another time. As I listened to him, I couldn't believe it. The woman I thought I knew for 24 years seemed so different from the person he described. I asked, "One last question, and then you can go. Did she tell you about anyone else?" He didn't hesitate. She hinted that a few guys were before me, but only mentioned one Joe something, maybe Oberman or Olderman. He's a fireman. She said he ended it because his wife was starting to get suspicious. Joe Olderman. He and Stephanie had been our friends for years since our daughters were little. I felt a wave of anger wash over me. Both Helen and I were fortunate that I had the afternoon to cool down. I was lucky I didn't lose control. I knew it could have ended very poorly. By dinner time, I had managed to keep my anger hidden. Helen was cheerful as always. We enjoyed a nice dinner while talking about the kids, her upcoming work, and my boring desk job. Somehow I was able to maintain a calm face and hide my rising frustration. That night, she was in bed watching a rerun of a show when I joined her. The bedroom was quiet and neat, with everything back in place. I leaned over to give Helen a gentle kiss on her cheek and reached out to hold her hand, wanting to be close to her. She looked at me with a tired expression and said, "Not tonight, sweetie. I'm feeling worn out. How about we just watch a bit of TV together?" Normally, I would take the hint and settle in beside her, maybe a little disappointed but understanding. But tonight, I felt a stronger need for her company. "I really want to be with you tonight," I said softly. "Just us." She sighed, looking at me as though weighing my words. Finally, with a slight shake of her head, she said, "All right, Rob, but let's keep it simple, all right?" We settled together quietly, her eyes still holding a trace of reluctance, and we shared a quiet moment. We stayed close, just enjoying each other's presence without any words. For a few minutes, there was only the warmth between us and the steady, calming rhythm of simply being near each other. Eventually, I let out a deep breath, feeling a sense of closeness and release. After a moment, she gently moved, saying, "I think I'll go get ready for bed now." I gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Thanks for tonight," I said. She responded with a brief nod, her eyes softening a bit. As we drifted into a comfortable silence, I felt grateful for the shared peace, and I settled into the quiet, letting it wash over me. There was a lot left unsaid between us, but for now, the silence was enough. I'd never seen Helen look so distressed in all the years we'd been together. Without saying anything, I moved closer to her, letting the silence hang between us. She looked at me, frozen, her face showing a mix of fear and sadness. After a long pause, she took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the floor. We were both quiet, lost in a tense moment that felt heavy with words unspoken. Eventually, she turned away slightly, her face tight with worry. I felt a pang of frustration and hurt as I watched her. This wasn't how things used to be. I knew the distance between us had grown over time, but standing there, I couldn't ignore it any longer. Trying to gather myself, I gently touched her shoulder, hoping she'd look at me. She turned slowly, her eyes filled with a quiet sorrow. We shared a moment of uncomfortable silence, each of us caught in our own thoughts. Finally, I broke the silence. "Helen," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "I stopped by the house today around lunchtime. I saw someone leaving Mark Malchek." Her face shifted, and I saw a flicker of shock in her eyes. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. After a moment, she looked down, her face pale, clearly struggling with what to say. We stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. Neither of us spoke, but the silence said more than any words could. Then I went upstairs and heard you in the shower. I saw the bedroom, so please don't try to tell me I misunderstood the situation, okay? She looked down and I could tell she was embarrassed. She nodded without saying anything. "I don't know if our marriage can survive this." Her eyes widened in shock. "But if there's a chance, it starts with you telling me everything. I need the whole truth, do you understand?" Helen nodded again and began to cry. "I'm so sorry, Rob. I can't believe I did something so terrible." She stopped for a moment as her tears took over. "I just want you to give me another chance. I will tell you everything, but please promise you won't hate me." "All right then. Tell me everything about you and that guy. What happened, where, when, how long, how often, and why?" She cried a little longer, then wiped her face. "I never really noticed him until the July 4th picnic. After that, he seemed to be around a lot, getting me drinks or snacks. A couple of times when you weren't with me, he was a bit too friendly, making comments and touching my back. But I forgot about it until last week. He called and asked if he could come over for help with a recipe. He was making a special dinner for his new girlfriend. So he came over and we worked through the recipe. I explained some things to him and he was thankful. We had a coffee and then I started to feel strange. Before I knew it, he took me upstairs, removed my clothes, and did something very wrong." She paused, fresh tears falling. I was confused and couldn't understand why this was happening, or why he didn't stop when I said no. He did it a couple of times, and even forced me to do things I didn't want to. When he was finished and getting dressed, he told me he had put something in the coffee. He showed me pictures he took of us together, Rob. Pictures of us. When this happened, he said I had to keep seeing him or he would make sure you and your friends at the precinct got copies of those pictures. Rob, I felt trapped. I listened without showing my feelings. I almost believed she was making up stories, but I wanted to hear everything. She had no idea that I had already talked to Mark. He called last week and said he was coming over today at 10:30 a.m. and that I better be ready for him. I was scared about the pictures, so I let him come over again. I sighed. "Helen, why didn't you tell me after the first time? Don't you know we could have checked for drugs and made sure he was stopped?" She looked down. "I see that now. I guess I wasn't thinking clearly. I was really scared about what you might do, to me and to him. Oh, Rob, I was so frightened, and so confused." She started to cry again. "I'm so sorry, baby." What a story, I thought. It seemed unlikely, yet not impossible if anyone could think that Mark Malchek would be foolish enough to harm a policeman's wife. But the tale he told me when I confronted him made more sense, even if it went against everything I thought I knew about my wife. Then there was the most troubling sign, the sound of Helen happily singing in the shower, just minutes after Malchek allegedly upset her again. I thought more, looking out the window, listening as Helen sniffled and wiped her eyes. "You've made a big mistake, Helen. After 25 years together, I would have thought you'd trust me." She looked at me softly and repeated, "I'm so sorry, Rob. I need time to think about what to do, and it might take a few days. In the meantime, don't speak to Mark again or mention this to anyone, all right?" "All right," she agreed, suddenly more hopeful. "Please, Rob, don't do anything that could cause you trouble." I leaned in, focusing on her face. "Helen, please tell me the truth. Is this the only time in our marriage you've been with someone else?" She tried to meet my gaze, but her eyes quickly flickered away before returning. I had questioned many people in my life, and I could tell what that meant. "There's been no one, honey. No one but you. Until Mark." She started to cry again and didn't finish her thought. The clear lie made me angry all over again. I stood up and began to pace the bedroom. "In case you haven't noticed, my dear wife, I'm not very happy with you right now. You're sleeping in the guest room tonight, so please take your things and go." "Rob, Did you not hear what I said?" I replied more firmly. "I'm done talking for tonight. Now please leave the room." "But baby, Go!" With a small gasp, she grabbed her robe and left the bedroom. I settled into bed to watch a football game for a while before going to sleep. I was surprised that I actually slept well, even though I didn't have Helen beside me. I guess it helped to clear my mind. When I got downstairs, I could smell coffee brewing. When I entered the kitchen, I saw that Helen had made a big breakfast. There were pancakes, sausages, scrambled eggs, even fresh orange juice. Helen was at the counter pouring my coffee. She looked tired and anxious. "Good morning, sweetie," she said softly, handing me the cup. "Hello, Helen," I replied flatly. "This looks like a nice breakfast." We ate together, talking about safe topics, and I noticed Helen gradually relaxed a bit. When I finished my meal, I pushed my chair back and stood up, a plan forming in my mind. There was only one way to get to the truth, so I told Helen I needed some time alone. After a quick stop in my workshop, I drove straight to Joe Olderman's house. As I pulled up, he was heading to his front door with a stack of mail. I asked him to join me for a short drive, saying I wanted his opinion on a car I was thinking of buying. He agreed, and we headed toward the car dealerships on Forbes Avenue. But instead of stopping there, I turned off onto a quiet road, parking in a secluded lot near a soccer field. Joe had been looking out the window, but now he turned to me with confusion. "Rob, what's going on? Why are we here?" Without a word, I fixed him with a hard look. "Joe, we've been friends for over 15 years. But that didn't stop you from betraying me, did it?" His face went pale as he leaned back wide-eyed. "Rob, I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop lying," I said coldly. "I talked to Helen. I know everything." He froze, realizing denial was pointless. His voice wavered as he spoke. "Rob, please, I didn't mean for it to happen. Helen came on to me. I tried to tell her no, but she kept insisting." I watched him as he tried to defend himself, visibly shaken and desperate. "Explain everything," I said quietly, "and don't leave anything out." Nervously, he began to tell the story. According to him, about a year earlier, Helen had become much more forward, turning their light-hearted friendly banter into something more. At first, he'd resisted, but eventually he gave in after her repeated advances. "Rob," he added, "I'm telling you this because you asked, but please understand I didn't want to hurt you." I listened silently as he finished, the weight of his words settling between us. She usually wanted to do things a certain way, and a few times, she had me tie her to the bed. And she was always so lively, well, you probably know. The way she talks a lot, saying things like be rougher and all that. He was still looking nervously around. "How long did this go on?" I asked firmly. "About 8 months. We met once or twice a week. I was always afraid you might find out. Then Stephanie started to act really strange, like she thought I was being unfaithful. I finally told Helen we had to stop. That was last June. How did she feel about it? She was upset, but she agreed because she didn't want Stephanie to know. She even joked, "I guess I'll have to find someone else, Joe." Did you ever ask her why she was unfaithful? Yeah, a few times. Even at the beginning I asked, "Why do you want to do this?" What did she say? Nothing that made much sense. She said she loved you and that you were great, but she needed something more, that this was more exciting. I have to admit, it was the best I ever had. Do you think you were her first? No, she mentioned a couple of other guys. I didn't know them well. Just that one was someone she met while catering. I leaned back and looked at him. He stared out the window. Finally, I said, "You really messed up, you know that? It doesn't matter how much she wanted you, there was only one right thing to do, and you did the opposite." He lowered his head, not meeting my gaze. I figured he was relieved I wasn't going to hurt him. "Our friendship is over. Get out of the car." "Here? But it's probably 10 miles to." His voice trailed off when he saw my face. He silently climbed out of the car and walked away. Without another word, I turned the car around and drove back to town. I went straight to Joe and Stephanie's house and was lucky to find Stephanie home. "Hi, Rob. Weren't you with Joe just now?" she asked, glancing at the empty car. "Yeah, but something came up. Can we talk for a few minutes?" Looking confused, she led me to the kitchen where we sat down with coffee. "Steph, we've been friends a long time and there's no easy way to say this. Joe and Helen had an affair." "What?" She looked shocked. After a moment, she shook her head. "Rob, I could believe you if you said Joe was with someone else. I thought something was going on last spring, but Helen? No way." I took out the mini recorder I'd hidden in my pocket before leaving. Without saying anything else, I rewound it and pressed play. We sat quietly, listening to my conversation with Joe. I felt like crying several times. I knew the tears would come later, but I held myself together. I noticed Steph's face harden, her lips tightening in an angry frown. I guessed that her marriage with Joe might be just as broken as mine. When the tape ended, we stayed silent for a few minutes. Then I asked her if any of this made sense to her. "Not really, Rob. For so many years we were just friends, right? We always joked around a bit. I remember you playfully pinching me or making silly comments about my bathing suit, but it was all in good fun. But this, Joe was acting so odd last spring that it's easy to think he might not have been faithful. Still, Helen is the last person I would expect him to be with." Suddenly, she looked at me with suspicion. "Rob, you didn't come here to make a move on me, did you? Like, some kind of revenge?" "Steph, I thought you knew me better than that. We've been friends for a long time. You know I care about you. Do you really think I'm that thoughtless?" She started to cry and said, "I'm sorry, Rob. I guess I'm a bit overwhelmed right now, not thinking clearly. It's hard to have a good opinion of men right now. Please remember that you and I are the ones hurt in this situation. Yes, you are a lovely woman and I am attracted to you, but that's not why I'm here. I wanted you to know the truth about your husband. I'm going to ask Helen to leave my home, and I'm here to help you deal with Joe in any way I can. I wanted you to understand that I'm on your side. That's the only reason I came." Still crying, she came over and sat on my lap in the kitchen. She wrapped her arms around me, rested her head on my shoulder, and sobbed. After a while, we were both in tears. We likely stayed like that for 30 minutes. The drive to Chicago was nearly 6 hours, giving me plenty of time to think. I couldn't comprehend how deeply Helen had betrayed me. It was clear she had been unfaithful with several others, and some she had pursued herself. The most painful part was how open she had been with these other men. She never showed the same willingness with me, always hesitant to try something new or even to be close before we were intimate. I had endured that for years. As I left Stephanie's house, I felt two things clearly. First, my marriage was over, and Helen would regret her choices. Second, I needed to talk to my daughters first. I called Linda, and she was excited about my surprise visit. We went to a diner near her apartment, where she told me about her new job and her relationship with Chad, her boyfriend. Then she asked, "Dad, what's going on? It's great to see you, but I can tell there's something on your mind. You seem really tense." I leaned in and said softly, "Honey, I need to tell you something important. Your mom and I are separating. I found out she has been seeing other people for a while now." The next few hours were tough. At first, Linda couldn't believe me. I tried to reassure her without sharing too many painful details about what I knew. Once we were back at her apartment and she started to understand the truth, she cried. It was heart-wrenching to see her struggle with the loss of the family she thought she had. We shared that moment of sadness together, and I felt my own tears. I stayed on Linda's couch that night, and in the morning, I asked her for a favor. Please don't talk to your mom for a few days, or until she reaches out. I need to see Veronica today, then he'll go home and start the divorce process. After that, your relationship with your mom is up to you. She loves you very much and has always been a good mother. What happened between us is about me, not you, sweetheart. I arrived in Kenyon that Sunday night, and my meeting with Veronica felt much like the one with Linda. It was painful and filled with tears, with questions that lingered without answers. I left early Monday morning. I had turned off my cell phone while I was away. When I switched it on, I saw I had 11 messages from Helen, mixing apologies with worry. I deleted them without listening and drove on, thinking about how to end our marriage. It broke my heart. A marriage I had given my all to, one I had hoped to enjoy for the rest of my life, now gone. Destroyed. All for reasons I could hardly understand. I made a call to a lawyer I knew, someone who could help me start the divorce process. As soon as I got into town, I went straight to his office. I spent about an hour explaining things, shared the evidence I had, and set the paperwork in motion. Since both our daughters were grown and out of the house, there wouldn't be any issues with custody or support. I wanted to keep the house, and if Helen tried to fight me on it, I was ready to stand my ground. Around 4 p.m., I drove by the house and Helen's car wasn't there. Good, I thought. I parked in the garage and made a call to a 24-hour locksmith service. By 6 p.m. when Helen returned, he had arranged for a few changes. I watched as she tried to unlock the front door and grew frustrated when her key wouldn't work. I opened the door and stood there quietly, observing her expression change from frustration to a forced, nervous smile. "Rob, thank goodness, where have you been? I've been so worried," she said. Her questions poured out, but I kept silent and simply gestured for her to come inside. "Sit down in the living room," I said in an even tone. She tried to hug me, but I stepped back and headed to the living room myself. Puzzled, she followed me and took a seat. "Rob, what's going on?" she asked, her voice shaky, her face showing concern. I stood across from her, letting the silence fill the room before finally speaking. "Helen, I would never hurt you physically, and I want you to know that," I began slowly. "You are someone I cared for deeply." She gasped. "Rob, what are you saying? I don't—" "Be quiet," I said firmly, interrupting her. "I want you to listen." Her face went pale, and I could see her hands shaking slightly in her lap. "We're going to have this conversation calmly," I continued. "And then you're going to leave. I don't care where you go. This marriage is over." She gasped, her mouth opening as if to speak, but a look from me stopped her. "You've been unfaithful with Mark, with Joe, and possibly others. I don't know how many, and I don't care." She sat there, stunned as I spoke. "For months, maybe even years, you've been giving to others what you wouldn't give to me, your husband." Helen looked down and the room fell silent. I let my words linger before quietly saying, "This is where it ends, Helen." I stood across from Helen, my voice calm but firm, unable to hide the frustration and sadness in my words. "You were willing to share parts of yourself with others, things you never shared with me, the one who's been by your side for over 25 years. Helen sat there, silent and tearful, her face frozen in shock. I wondered if she was regretting her choices or realizing the weight of what she'd done. "The hardest part to accept," I continued, "is that I know you love me. I thought we both looked forward to growing old together, but that future is gone now." I pointed to a few packed suitcases in the corner. "In a few minutes, you'll take those and leave. You won't be coming back." She gasped, finally breaking her silence. "No, Rob, please, I cut her off, my voice unwavering. "This is happening, Helen. I'm asking you to leave. But before you go, there are a couple of things I need to take care of." I walked closer until I stood directly in front of her. She looked up at me, her eyes full of fear and sadness. I slipped off my wedding ring and dropped it in her lap. Then, I gently took her left hand and removed her wedding band, placing it beside mine. I kept the engagement ring, the one that had belonged to my grandmother. This ring stays with me. The wedding bands? Do whatever you want with them. They once stood for love and loyalty, but we know what they mean now. I picked up a glass vase from the table, a beautiful keepsake from our 5th anniversary, full of bright blue and green highlights. Remember this? We bought it in Venice, a symbol of how much we meant to each other. With a deep breath, I let go of it, watching as it shattered on the floor. Helen cried out, but I didn't look back. That symbol means nothing anymore, I said, my tone flat. I turned to the coffee table, where our photo albums lay, the one from our wedding and another from our years together as a family. I picked them up and tossed them into the fireplace. All our memories, everything we thought we'd share forever, I said softly, watching the flames consume the photos. I don't need these anymore, right, Helen? I bent down and poured lighter fluid on the albums, then lit a match and set them on fire. Helen suddenly rushed to the fireplace, shouting, "No!" I quickly wrapped my arms around her waist and pulled her back to the couch, where she fell into tears. We both watched as the flames destroyed the albums. I lightly touched the pocket where I had kept the pictures of our daughters that I had saved from the family book. Those memories were still very important to me. In just a few minutes, both albums turned to ash. Helen continued to cry, her face turned away from me. "All right, Helen, that's enough," I said firmly, clapping my hands. "The show is over, and you need to go." When she didn't move, I grabbed her arm and helped her to her feet, guiding her toward the front door. "Wait, Rob, wait," she said, trying to pull away. "You can't just throw me out of here." "Actually, I can, Helen, and I will." Her face showed her sadness and fear. "Without letting me explain? Without hearing my side of things?" I stepped back and looked at her for a long moment. "Helen, do you really think there's anything you can say that will make this hurt less? Anything that will change how I feel about your betrayal and the pain you've caused me? Anything at all that can make this better? But I haven't even told you why Do you think I care why?" I raised my voice. "Will knowing your reasons make things okay? Oh, now everything's fine because I understand. Are you serious?" She just stared at me, looking tired and scared without saying a word. After a moment, she said, "But what about the girls?" "I visited Linda and Ronnie over the weekend. They both know about what happened and that I'm going to divorce you." "Oh, no!" she exclaimed, collapsing to the floor in tears. I observed her for a few minutes. My dear wife, the mother of my children, my partner for 25 years. Then I left her there and went to load her suitcases into the trunk of her car. When I returned, she was sitting on the floor, staring blankly into space. Without saying anything, I helped her to her feet and led her outside to the car. The car key lay on top, and I left her by the driver's door. I thought about what to say, but nothing felt right. "Goodbye, Helen," seemed too simple, and I couldn't find the right words for the situation. So I just left her there. I went back inside and locked the door behind me. I stood in the front hall, not moving, not really thinking. I was just waiting to hear her car drive away. I couldn't help but chuckle when I thought about it. Life without Helen was very different from life with her. I felt sad and alone instead of being happy and satisfied. I mostly cooked for myself, and my meals were not great, unlike the wonderful dishes Helen used to make. I also had more freedom in my choices, but it didn't fill the emptiness I felt inside. The reason I mentioned my freedom might need some explanation. Matilda Jacobson worked in the same precinct as I did. She was 38 and divorced, and she often showed interest in me. I enjoyed flirting back with her, even if it didn't mean much. Matilda was tall with light blonde hair, which was definitely dyed. She liked to wear short skirts and tight tops. While she wasn't exactly pretty, she had a nice figure. Many of the guys at work were attracted to her, but for some reason, I was the one she talked to the most. When other officers asked her out, she would tell them, "Sorry, you're great, but I don't date cops." The day after I ended things with Helen, my partner Jim noticed I was down and asked what was wrong. We had been working together for nearly 10 years, so I felt comfortable sharing my story, at least the basics. I left out the details of what had happened with Helen. I knew the news would spread quickly, and sure enough, by the end of the week, my colleagues were offering their sympathies, saying things like, "Sorry about your situation," and inviting me out for drinks after work. What I didn't expect was the doorbell to ring on a Sunday afternoon 2 weeks later, revealing Matilda on the porch. She had brought a casserole and was wearing casual white shorts and a snug pink top. She looked very determined. "I thought you might need something," she said cheerfully, without explaining what she meant. She followed me into the kitchen, placed the casserole down, and leaned in for a kiss that surprised me. After a moment, I gently pulled back and asked, "That was unexpected, Matilda, but what's going on?" "Do you really need to ask?" she replied, smiling and looking comfortable. I sat down at the table and chuckled. "Okay, I get it, but I'm a bit confused. I thought you didn't date cops." "I don't date most of them," she said. "But I'm interested in you, Rob. All that flirting over the years meant something. You have been a happily married man, and I don't want to interfere in anyone's marriage. Now that Helen is gone and your marriage is over, it seems like a good time to get to know each other better," she said with a playful smile. Her outfit, her kiss, and her words had a big effect on me. But I wasn't going to be foolish. I replied, "Matilda, I appreciate the interest, but I'm not in a good place for a new relationship. I've just ended things with my wife, and I'm not ready for anything like that." She smiled and kissed me softly. "I understand, Rob. This isn't about a serious relationship. This is about having some fun with someone who has liked you for a long time. Are you going to just send me away?" We spent nearly 3 hours together. We shared some intimate moments, and even though I struggled at times, it was enjoyable, and I found myself forgetting about Helen. Matilda was free and energetic in a way I had always hoped for. She was enthusiastic and wanted to be close. We shared a connection that felt exciting and new. Afterward, we both enjoyed a shower, and then we headed to the kitchen to eat Matilda's casserole. It was decent, but not as good as the meals Helen used to make. After eating, she kissed me and mentioned that she needed to go home to take care of her cats. "Matilda," I said, hugging her, "that was amazing. You are truly wonderful." I meant it in the moment, hoping to say something nice. She grinned and replied, "That was everything I hoped for, Rob. I would love to do it again sometime." Then she noticed my uncertain expression. "Don't worry," she said kindly. "I'm not making any promises and am not asking for any. I know you just broke up with Helen and you probably feel really lost right now. So I'm just suggesting that the next time you feel like having some fun, you give me a call, okay?" With that, she gave me one last playful kiss, smiled at me, and left. Since then, I've been seeing Matilda regularly, at least a couple of times a week. It's been over a year now, and I still enjoy it. Knowing that I can share a special connection whenever I want, and that she genuinely wants to be with me, it's great. She is open to trying different things, but she especially enjoys being on top. I like it too. She is fun and energetic, and she's always ready for more whenever I am. You might think that's all a guy needs to be happy, but anyone who has been happily married will know it's not quite that simple. Matilda was wonderful in some ways, but our conversations were limited. She didn't have the depth or humor that Helen did. When we went to see a movie, she didn't have the interesting thoughts to share that Helen always did, so our talks often felt dull. Plus, we didn't have years of shared memories, like raising kids or family trips. Most importantly, we weren't in love. Occasionally, I would mention that I didn't think we were meant to be together forever. She would always reassure me. "Listen, Rob, I enjoy our time together, but you're not my perfect match either. You're someone I like who treats me well. I'm having fun, and I think you are too. After being single for 12 years, I'm just not looking for anything more serious right now. So that was the enjoyable part of my life, hanging out with Matilda. Plus, I didn't have to pursue women or go out to find someone. The connection was right there for me, just a quick call away. The rest of my life was much less satisfying. I can't fully express how much I missed my life with Helen, before I realized how unfaithful she had been. I missed her cooking and her company. Just being around her, sharing smiles and inside jokes that come from being together for 25 years. That doesn't mean I wanted her back. Even after some time had passed, I felt a mix of anger and confusion. I kept wondering how a happily married woman could betray me. Was it something about me? I never quite understood it all. Linda and Ronnie were wonderful. They were clearly upset, and I knew they were angry with their mother, but they still managed to be caring daughters to both of us. In fact, Ronnie was the one who helped save Helen's life. though I learned about that later. This happened on the Saturday after I asked Helen to leave. On Thursday, my lawyer served her with divorce papers saying she had been unfaithful. I didn't want to deal with any complicated issues. That Saturday night, Helen took a lot of sleeping pills. Then she panicked and called Ronnie for help. Ronnie quickly called for emergency services. They took Helen to the hospital, where doctors provided care, and she recovered after a scary day or so in the intensive care unit, with the girls resting in chairs beside her. A couple of weeks after Helen left the hospital, my daughters visited me for the weekend. On Sunday, before they left, they wanted to talk, which they had obviously planned. "Dad, Ronnie and I have a huge favor to ask," Linda began. "As long as it doesn't have to do with your mom, he'll do anything for you," I replied. They exchanged looks. "Well, Dad, it actually does involve Mom. She, tried to harm herself a while ago." "What?" I exclaimed. Linda explained everything. Then she said, "Here's the deal. Until you finalize the divorce, Mom is still on your health insurance. She has started seeing a therapist to help understand her actions. But if you divorce her, she loses her insurance and can't see the therapist. So, Dad, would you be willing to delay the divorce?" I sighed. Clearly, I was not going to win this one with both my daughters concerned for their mother's well-being. I could see their point. So my lawyer prepared a legal separation instead, allowing Helen to keep her health insurance and continue seeing her therapist. I didn't mind too much. It wasn't my money. It was from the insurance company. As much as I wasn't fond of her, I didn't want Helen to feel hopeless. The holidays were tough. How could they not be? Thanksgiving and Christmas only reminded me of how our family had fallen apart. For Thanksgiving, we decided to have dinner with Stephanie Olderman and her kids. She had recently ended things with Joe, who was now living in an apartment. Their daughter Ariel and son Peter were friends of Linda and Ronnie, so we formed a small group at the table in Stephanie's dining room. But it just wasn't the same. Stephanie and the kids didn't cook like Helen used to. We all felt the absence of someone important and understood why. We tried to appreciate what we had, and parts of the evening were enjoyable. But on the drive back home, Linda, Ronnie, and I were quiet and sad. Christmas turned out to be even harder for me. The girls felt they should be with Helen since she had missed Thanksgiving with them. So I went to my brother's house to celebrate with him and his family. I love my brother and his wife, and their kids are sweet, but they are younger than mine. Still, I kept thinking about how different the holiday could have been without the troubles with my wife. By New Year's Day, I started to feel a bit better. It had been over 3 months. I was still here. I had a connection with someone, I kept my job, and I had my wonderful daughters and friends. I knew I would be okay. My friend Jim and his wife Patty were supportive. They invited me to dinner at least once a month, made me laugh, and helped me not feel too down about things. I knew they were upset with Helen just as I was, but we rarely discussed her. I regularly had meals with Stephanie, and in April, we explored a more intimate relationship. Unlike me, she didn't have a steady partner, and she was feeling lonely and a bit insecure. We talked about it for a while, whether we really wanted to mix our friendship with something more. In the end, it felt right, so we spent a weekend together at her place, and then a couple of weeks later at mine. But honestly, it wasn't as great as I hoped. Stephanie was attractive, but the strange situation made it hard for us to fully relax and enjoy each other's company. It felt uncomfortable, almost like being too close to a family member. After the second weekend, Stephanie said, "I'm glad we tried this, Rob, thank you. It made me feel wanted and not like just an everyday housewife. But I don't think I want to do it again. I value our friendship and think we'll be better off without the extra part." I agreed, and we decided to go back to being friends, supporting each other as she worked through her divorce, and I tried to navigate being single. The next holiday season a year later without Helen felt easier. Linda and Ronnie balanced their time between her and me. The girls and I still thought about the past, but we had fun together, and it felt more like a family. I think I was finally accepting being single for now. I even started considering dating again. I realized that Matilda and I did not have a real future together, even though I enjoyed our time. I started to think about whether I could find a true romance at my age, just a couple of years before I turned 50. Then, one spring weekend, Linda and Ronnie visited again, and I sensed something was about to happen. I worried that it wouldn't be good news. I was correct. It was about Helen. "Dad, She's starting to put her life back together and she wants to see you. Why would she want that? She knows how I feel about her. Ronnie sighed and sat next to me on the sofa, leaning slightly against me. It's about her therapy. It's going well, she says. Doctor. Oliva thinks it's time for her to talk to you to explain and apologize. I rolled my eyes. Explain? Why should I care about her reasons for what she did? Sorry, girls. I shouldn't have said that. But why should I care about her explanations? She hurt our family, nothing more needs to be said. I don't want to hear her apologies. The girls patiently told me that this talk wasn't for me, it was for Helen. She needs to acknowledge what she did, Dad. It's part of healing, I guess. Dr. Oliva said it's up to you whether to forgive her, but she wants to take responsibility. So I'm supposed to sit here and listen while she tells me she didn't mean to hurt me? No way. I stood up and left the room. But in the end, they convinced me. If you have daughters, you understand. I love them, and they still care about their mother, which is important. And it's tough to say no to them when they truly want something. On the second Saturday in May, at 2 in the afternoon, Helen's old car arrived in the driveway. I hadn't spoken to her or seen her for more than 17 months. I stood in the open front door watching as she took in the house and yard, remembering the place she had lived for nearly 20 years. When she saw me standing there, she paused, looking hesitant. Hello, Rob, she said softly. Hello, Helen. Why don't you come sit in the backyard? I had made up my mind not to let her see inside the house. Without saying more, I walked around the side of the garage to the back, expecting she would follow. We sat at an old table on the patio. I poured a soda for Helen and placed it in front of her. She looked thinner and a bit more worn than I remembered, but she was still a very attractive woman, which annoyed me as soon as I noticed it. Thank you for letting me come, Rob, she said after a few quiet moments. I know you might not have wanted this, and I appreciate it. Just don't give me any nonsense, okay? I'm ready to hear you out like the girls said you needed to. Just be honest with me. Speak the truth or leave. She nodded. I promise no lies, no nonsense. And Rob, I'm really sorry for everything I did. Yeah? Well, that's nice to hear. Everything is just fine now, you know, Helen? I realized I was feeling angry, more upset than I expected. I took a deep breath and said, Sorry. You'll stay quiet, go ahead. After a moment, she said, You need to know that what I did wasn't about you, Rob, or our marriage. I'm sure you've wondered about that, wondered what you did wrong. But it was me. I found myself in a situation I didn't understand, living in 2 different worlds. The one with you and the girls, and another world where I acted out of character. I scoffed, but stayed quiet. Let her tell her story, no matter how strange it sounded. You remember 7 years ago, the summer my parents died? Of course I remembered. Her father passed away suddenly in his backyard on a beautiful June day. Her mother was heartbroken and didn't want to live anymore, and less than 3 months later, she passed away in her sleep. It had been hard for all of us, especially for Helen, their only child. And then that fall, not long after my mom's funeral, Arlene was hit by a car? I nodded. All 3 losses happened in that short time. Arlene and Helen had been co-workers in catering and very close friends. Anyway, I fell apart after all that, as I'm sure you recall. I felt lost, like I didn't know what my life was for anymore. I went through the motions working, taking care of you and the girls, but I wasn't really myself. Then in November, on a weekend you were away hunting with Joe, I decided to go out with Sandy, a divorced neighbor, for a couple of drinks. I don't remember where the girls were, probably at a friend's house. But I just needed to get out, to be on my own, to do something different. We went to Perozzi's, had some drinks, and danced with a few guys. Then it got late, and one of the men we had been dancing with offered to take Sandy home. I could see she wanted to be with him, and since I had driven us there, I said okay. And then, she paused and took a deep breath. Tears rolled down her face. And then a big, strong man named Ted picked me up. Ted Archer from Minneapolis. He talked to me, got me to dance with him, and bought me a couple more drinks. I ended up going to his hotel room. I can't explain it, Rob. She looked at me now, even with her tears. He was confident and strong, and somehow he made me feel different in a way I didn't know before. We went to his room, and he did things I never agreed to. He just took charge, and I went along with it. He pushed me in ways that made me uncomfortable. It went on for a long time. He kept me in place and made me do things that made me feel ashamed. I did whatever he asked. It was hard to say no. In the morning, I woke up feeling terrible about what I had done. I wanted to quietly get dressed and leave, but he caught me and brought me back for more before I could go. When I got home, I was a mess. Thank goodness you and the girls were still out. I showered repeatedly and threw my clothes away. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't believe I had betrayed you like that, and how Ted had made me act in ways I said I never would. I knelt down and prayed for forgiveness, hoping that my secret would remain hidden, and I could find a way to make it right with you. That night, I wonder if you remember, I was clingy and nervous, like we had a fight. I told you I didn't want to be close because I was scared you would sense something was wrong, but I wanted you to hold me all night. When I realized my secret was safe and you didn't know, I felt relief and promised myself to be the best wife I could be. We even grew closer than usual for a while, and I let you try some things you wanted instead of saying no like I usually did. She took a sip of her soda, looking at me with sadness in her eyes. Her tears had stopped, but she looked empty. That's how it had started, she said. That one night with the man from out of town had taken root in her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about why she had let it happen, and why his strong personality had affected her so much. The urge for more of what was new and different grew inside her. She fought the feeling for nearly 2 years, but when I was away visiting colleges with Linda and Ronnie, she gave in again. She found a bar about half an hour from town, met someone, and spent the night with a truck driver. I can't put into words how ashamed I felt, Rob, or the thrill that came with it. I was horrified by what I was doing, truly horrified, and it made me feel like a villain. Yet at the same time, it was so thrilling and the feelings were so intense and exciting, I just got lost in them. Since I started seeing Dr. Oliva, I see now that the shame and the thrill went together for me. It felt like it had to be something I was ashamed of for me to enjoy those moments. I also realized that my feelings were a part of my life but kept separate from everything else. After the first couple of times, I began to store away my feelings about my actions in a little box in my mind. I still felt ashamed, even a bit sick, but the shame found its way into that little box, and it stayed separate from my daily life. She looked at you. This must sound crazy to you, or maybe just like I'm trying to excuse what I did, but it's not like that. I know there's no good reason for my actions, Rob, but it truly did stay in a different part of my mind over time. With the rest of my mind, I could keep loving you and the girls, and going on with my job and being a good homemaker, even continue being the distant partner who frustrated you so much. After her second brief encounter, she stopped resisting her feelings as much, and her connections with others happened more often whenever the girls and I were away. I think there were 6, or maybe 7, over 2 or 3 years. I've tried hard to remember, but am not quite sure. Then one of her clients from catering showed interest in her strongly, similar to how Ted had, and she began a relationship with him. It felt like my night with Ted, but it went on for nearly 6 months. We met once or sometimes twice a week, usually in the afternoon, and he just wanted to use me. He didn't hurt me, but he did what he wanted. After that ended, something changed inside me, I guess. But after that, I went on to find another partner, and another after that. Between the client and her most recent connection, Mark Malchek, there were 3 other men over a couple of years. One of them our old friend Joe. Helen discovered she didn't need to hold back. In fact, she took the lead more and more with each man, exploring things as she wanted. But the relationships were always wild and free, just the kind of closeness I had wanted with her, which she had always kept from me. I've thought about this a lot, Rob, and that must be the worst way I betrayed you. I am so sorry, finding out that I had. Helen looked tired and sad. The day had turned gray, and the wind was picking up. She had been sharing her feelings for a long time. Okay, I said after a moment. What now? I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I even felt a bit sorry for her, but I felt more sorry for myself. It seemed like she could read my mind. I can't imagine how hard this is for you and how much I've hurt you, she said. She gave me a small, uncertain smile. You're a good man, Many would have reacted much worse, not just ended things. She looked away into the backyard. Sometimes I wish you had been harsher, but I wouldn't want you in trouble for what I caused. Turning back to me, she continued, I know it's tough for you. I'm alone in my small apartment, missing the only person I loved. I feel empty and sad, and I know I brought this on myself. But you, Rob, I shattered our happy marriage into tiny pieces. It's not your fault. There's nothing you did wrong, and I can't fix it. I would do anything to make up for what I've done, but I know there's nothing that truly can. I'm really sorry. She was crying softly, and I wanted to tell her that she couldn't call me honey anymore. But I stayed quiet, knowing she realized that already. Helen cried for a little while, and I watched her. I wondered why I didn't have 100 questions for her, but nothing else came to mind. I definitely didn't want to hear more about her past actions. What I had learned was more than enough. Why did you choose Mark and Joe? I asked suddenly. They are two guys we know. One is one of our oldest friends. What was going on? I don't know, she replied through her tears. I've discussed it with Dr. Oliva. I guess it means I was losing control even more. I wasn't being careful about keeping my other life away from you and me. Maybe I was secretly hoping to be found out. I felt so ashamed and desperate about what I was doing that I thought the only way it would end was if you caught me. So I started seeing Joe, who lived just around the corner. Pretty silly, right? It doesn't make much sense to me either. She continued crying, and I just sat there watching her. Finally, she calmed down and looked at me, managing a weak smile. Is there anything else you want to ask me, Rob? Or anything to say? You can still yell at me, tell me how awful I was and how upset you are about everything I've ruined. I stood up and began to pace on the patio. I don't see the point, Helen. Nothing I say or do can change things. You tossed a big problem into our marriage and it blew everything apart. That's it. And now it's been a year and a half. I'm not as angry as I was before, just sad, and maybe a bit bitter. I hope sharing your story helped you in your therapy, but honestly, it didn't do much for me. All that talk about living separate lives and keeping one boxed away, it sounds pretty complicated to me. She smiled faintly. I understand why you might feel that way. Dr. Oliva explained it to me. It's called schizoid sexuality. Can you believe it has a name? But if it sounds off to you, that's okay. I wasn't trying to make excuses for my actions, Rob. There are none. But I wanted to admit what I did to you, the person I loved the most, the one I hurt the most. Actually, I do have another question, I said. Why did you want to end it all? After I got the divorce papers, I fell apart. I started drinking, and you know I don't handle alcohol well. One Saturday night, I went to a bar hoping to meet someone. I wanted to spend time with someone. But the man I met was too rough, and I got scared. I tried to leave, but he got angry and threatened me. I screamed, which made him back off for a bit, and I ran out of the room. I got to my car and drove away, crying and terrified. When I got back to my apartment, I felt so ashamed of what I had done. It made me think about all those moments before. So, I swallowed some pills, thinking it would end the pain. But then I realized I couldn't do that to the girls. What I had done to you was one thing, but I couldn't take away their mother. I called my daughter Ronnie, and thankfully she contacted emergency services right away. They got Helen to the hospital in time, and she recovered. She told me she felt like a terrible person, lying there while everyone was so kind to her, despite her mistakes. Helen sat quietly, staring at the ground for a moment, then took a deep breath and stood up. Thanks for letting me come talk to you, Rob. It means a lot. She managed a small smile. I bet the girls talked you into it, didn't they? I nodded, smiling a little. I want to make things right however I can, though I know nothing can fully make up for what I've done. But please, if there's ever anything, just let me know. She gave me a last look and then turned toward her car. When I started to follow, she gently waved me off, saying, "No, don't. I'd rather go on my own." I watched her as she walked around the garage and disappeared from sight. After she left, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and an unease I couldn't quite shake. Talking with Helen had brought back all those painful memories from when I first discovered her affair, and all the hurt came rushing back. I went inside and picked up the phone. "Hey, Matilda, it's me. Listen, I know I was going to pick you up later, but are you free now?" When Matilda arrived, she immediately noticed that I was upset. She gave me a warm hug and looked at me with concern. "Did things with Helen go badly?" she asked. "It was okay," I said, sighing. "Just a lot to process. I'm still not feeling great, though." She gave me a reassuring smile and said, "Don't worry, we'll get you feeling better." She led me over to the couch and we sat together quietly, her calming presence helping me relax and let go of some of the tension. It was just what I needed: peaceful, comforting, and free from the weight of the past. I pulled her close, feeling her warmth against me, and then something powerful swept over me. We fell back onto the bed, and Matilda turned to hold me gently. "Are you okay?" she asked. Suddenly, I found myself in tears, unable to stop. She held my head on her shoulder, stroking my hair and saying softly, "It's all right, everything is okay." She comforted me, and I kept crying. After a while, I felt calm again and sat up against the headboard, keeping Matilda close. "Wow," I said, looking at her. She smiled back at me. "I really don't know what just happened." "That's fine," she said. "How do you feel now? Think we could have another round and still finish the movie?" I smiled at her. "Give me a few moments, and it'll be good to go." "It's a deal," she replied. "This time, it'll make sure to keep you on your toes." On Tuesday, 3 days later, I found a box by the front door when I got home from work. There was a note in Helen's handwriting. I looked at it for a moment before picking it up and carrying it inside, placing it on the kitchen table. Inside the box was a homemade apple pie. The note read, "Dear Rob, thank you for listening to me the other day. Your kindness was more than I deserved. I know you've always enjoyed my apple pies, and I hope you like this one. Love, Helen." I prepared some dinner while reading the newspaper, occasionally glancing at the pie. For some reason, I hesitated to eat it. Finally, I decided that was silly. I went to the living room and turned on a game. Then I returned to the kitchen, cut a piece of pie, poured a glass of milk, and brought them back to the living room. The game was boring, and I turned it off after a couple of innings, but the pie was amazing. I ended up having 3 pieces. Helen's apple pie left me feeling more confused than I was on Saturday. I wanted to thank her, but I didn't want to talk to her. So I waited until early afternoon when she would be at work and called her apartment. It was the first time I had ever called there. I only had the number because Linda and Ronnie had given it to me. When the answering machine picked up, I said, "Helen? Hi, it's Rob. I just wanted to thank you for the pie. It was delicious. So, that's it. I guess thanks. Bye." It turned out to be fortunate that around this time I met someone I wanted to date. I thought it would be great, but it didn't turn out the way I expected. Her name was Leanne. I met her while working on a domestic violence case. Jim and I had to take a man out of his house. He was drunk and had harmed his wife. The neighbors called the police, and when they arrived, she was in the bathroom. When she finally came out, we saw the marks on her face. The man ended up spending the night in a cell, and the next day, a woman around 40 came to bail him out. Her name was Leanne, and she was his sister. She was tall, slim, had dark hair, and was divorced, as I learned later. She didn't have many kind words for her brother, saying, "But has family," with a sigh. I understood, and we talked while waiting for the bail to be processed. On a whim, I asked if I could buy her a cup of coffee. She looked surprised, but replied, "I don't have time today, but I'd like to have lunch sometime if that's okay." We planned to meet the next day at a diner just 2 blocks away. It turned out she worked in an office nearby. It felt promising. We had lunch and really connected. Leanne was charming, had a great sense of humor, and seemed to be interested in me. So I asked her to the movies that Saturday. However, when I told Matilda on Friday that I was busy that night and suggested we meet on Sunday instead, she got really upset. "You can't be serious," she exclaimed softly since we were in a quiet corner of the station. "I've been here for you for over a year and now you have a date?" I was confused. "But Matilda, you were the one who said—" She interrupted me. "I picked you up when you were down, helped you get back on track, and you said I brought you happiness." She continued for a bit, and I waited until she took a breath. Then I said, "Matilda, I'm sorry, but you said from the start that you didn't want anything serious, just a casual arrangement." "Calmer now," she asked. "Can't a girl change her mind? We've spent a lot of time together. Didn't you notice I care about you?" I had to tread carefully. "Honestly, Matilda, You're amazing, a great woman, but I thought we were just friends. I didn't see us as anything more. The idea of a real romance, let alone anything serious with Matilda, was hard for me to imagine, but I didn't say that. Even the kind way I put it didn't seem to help. I understand your point, she said, upset. So you're only interested in fun? Well, guess what you're not getting any more from me. I'm done being in your bed, and you can count on that. She turned away and walked off. That was tough to hear, but at least I knew where I stood. I would miss some parts, like the closeness, but I wouldn't miss her cooking or be sad about her company. So I went out with Leanne on Saturday, feeling ready to start fresh. After a few weeks, I realized lucky wasn't the right word for my situation. Leanne was quite reserved. She made it clear that we wouldn't be getting closer until we were engaged. Plus, she liked to take charge. Her idea of fun was telling me where to put the dishes in my kitchen, complaining about my car's age, and suggesting better restaurants than the one I had chosen for us. After 4 dates, I decided to end things with Leanne. I never regretted it, even when she called me a few times, the last one being pretty upset. I couldn't understand how someone would marry her in the first place. The following weekend, Jim and Patty invited me to dinner, and to my surprise, Patty's younger sister Barbara joined us. I thought it might be a setup, but we all enjoyed a nice evening together. On Monday, I joked with Jim about it. He looked a bit guilty but couldn't stop laughing. "It's not my fault, Rob," he said, still chuckling. "Patty knows you're dating again and wants you to meet Barb." I found Barbara attractive and was open to the idea, but I felt cautious. What if we don't get along? I don't want to look bad in front of Patty. Jim reassured me, saying, "Patty said she only wants you to give Barb a chance. She promised it wouldn't be a problem if things didn't work out." I decided to take a chance. I called Barb and asked her out for dinner on Saturday. We had a nice, easygoing time, and when I dropped her off, I thought a simple goodbye was all that would happen. But she smiled and said, "Would you like to come in for coffee? It's still early." I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. She made some coffee, and when she returned, I was surprised by her outfit. We ended up having a lovely time together, and I felt a connection growing between us. It wasn't an amazing experience like Matilda's, but I still had a good time. Afterward, I picked her up and carried her into the bedroom, and we enjoyed each other's company. We fell asleep for a while, but she woke me up and we spent some more time together in the night. The last time was early in the morning, after which she made bacon and eggs and sat on my lap while feeding me. I drove away feeling tired, confused, and happy. Our time together had been fun, and it seemed like there could be more whatever I wanted. Barb was full of energy and attractive. Even though I hardly knew her, I liked the idea of getting to know her better while enjoying more time together. But soon I started to understand why Barb was still single at 44, even though she was lovely. On our second date, we went to the movies and then back to my house, where we spent the night like before. The next morning over breakfast, Barb started dropping hints that she wanted to move in with me. She mentioned how a woman's touch would improve my place, asked about my dinner preferences, and complained about how small her apartment was and the high rent. I was too surprised to say anything, so I wisely kept quiet. But by our third date, she was talking about marriage. She wanted to know when I would introduce her to my daughters, saying it was important to have a good relationship with them. This was moving way faster than I was ready for. Marriage? I had only spent 3 nights with this woman. When I gently pointed that out, things went downhill. First, she didn't understand my hints, so I decided to be more direct. "Barb, I feel like things are moving too fast for us. I like you, but I'm not ready to think about marriage again." She gave me a cold look and said, "Why commit when you can have everything for free?" "No, Barb, if you weren't ready for marriage, why have you been with me each time we meet? What's that about?" "Barb, I think we're both..." "No, you're just another guy who thinks with his impulses. You just want to get a girl interested, not caring about what she feels." And suddenly, she broke down in tears at my kitchen table, hiding her face in her hands. I tried my best to comfort her, but she remained upset and didn't want to talk. In the end, I drove her back to her place, where she slammed the car door and went inside. Feeling confused, I went home and called Jim. "Is your sister-in-law acting strange, or is there something wrong with me?" He laughed. "Let me guess," he said. "You had some fun on a couple of dates, And suddenly she starts talking about engagement rings, places to travel for a honeymoon, and plans for the future. Am I right? Absolutely, my friend. Has this happened before? Yes, it has. Patty and I thought about giving you a heads up, but we decided to let things unfold naturally. Barb tends to get a bit too excited, and it has scared off more than a few guys. It's too bad because she is a nice person. But based on past experience, Rob, she probably won't want to talk to you anymore. You're in the past now. Well, I said, I'm okay with that. That was one intense conversation. She was fun, but saying she rushed things a little doesn't even cover it. So, are we good? Will Patty be upset with me now? Not at all, Rob. You gave it a try, and that's all she could have asked for. As the weeks passed, my luck with dating didn't get any better. I went out with a few other women like a cop's cousin I knew and a cute waitress at a diner I visited, but nothing really worked out. Sometimes I got lucky, but mostly I didn't. I wasn't sure if I was really over Helen and ready for something new. But it didn't matter because I just didn't connect with anyone I dated. Meanwhile, Helen was still bringing me food once a week. After the apple pie, she brought over a delicious peach pie. As always, I left her a message to thank her. Then it became a routine. She made me roast chicken, meatloaf, and pasta salad. I started eating well again a couple of times a week, but without Matilda, I was back to living a pretty bland life. One Saturday afternoon, I was driving home from the hardware store when I spotted Helen. She was in a parking lot, putting groceries into her car. I was stopped at a red light, so I watched her, noticing all the little things about her. After I got home, I went back to working on the bathroom tile I was fixing, but my thoughts kept drifting. About an hour later, I decided to freshen up and put on clean clothes. I got in my car and, without really thinking about it, found myself in front of Helen's apartment. When she opened the door, she looked surprised to see me, but after a moment she smiled a bit shyly. "Hi, Rob, come in. This is a nice surprise." She was wearing shorts and a green top. She looked good, more relaxed than when she had visited me last. She was still the same figure I remembered, though slightly thinner. "Hi, Helen." I walked in and sat down on her couch, still wondering what I was doing there. "I wanted to thank you for all the wonderful food you've been giving me. You're the best cook I've ever known. Everything has been so tasty." She smiled widely, clearly happy to hear that. "I'm glad, Rob." We sat quietly together for a moment. Helen's smile slowly faded, and she looked unsure, probably wondering why he'd come over. I found myself wondering the same. "Helen," I said, breaking the silence, "thank you for the meal. It was thoughtful." She smiled, though it looked a little shy, and nodded. "I still like cooking for you," she replied softly. We sat there, the weight of unspoken words filling the room. Helen's expression grew more uncertain, her eyes searching mine, but neither of us said anything more. After a pause, I took a deep breath and said, "It's been a long journey, hasn't it, Helen?" She nodded, her eyes a bit misty as she looked down. There was a lot we weren't saying, but maybe that was for the best. Finally, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, offering it to her so she could wipe her eyes. She accepted it with a grateful look, dabbing at her face. "Thank you, Rob," she whispered. We exchanged a quiet, understanding look before I stood up to leave. There were no more words, just a brief, soft smile shared between us. Then I turned and walked out, leaving both of us in a silence that felt, somehow, like closure. I think she wanted to say more, but she just sat back, still kneeling in front of me, and looked down at the floor. "That felt really nice, Helen," I said. There was a long, tense silence. Suddenly, I couldn't take it anymore. "I have to go," I said roughly. I stood up, pulled up my boxers and pants, and left the apartment without looking back. I listened behind me, but Helen didn't say anything else. On my drive home from Helen's apartment, I was confused about what had just happened. I knew I had asked her for something, and she agreed. It seemed like she was into it too, but I wasn't sure what it meant for us or what would come next. Did I want to start seeing her again? Did I even want to meet her? I tried to forget about it and focused on my life, wondering idly if the weekly food deliveries would stop. But the following Tuesday, There was a casserole dish with Helen's chicken cacciatore in it, one of my favorites, as she probably remembered. I made a big pot of rice and enjoyed it for 3 straight dinners. I still didn't know what to say to her, so I left my thanks in a voice message like usual while she was out. The week after that, she left me a pasta salad. In the meantime, I was busy with my job and the politics at work. A new desk sergeant had joined our precinct. He was quite a troublemaker, an arrogant person who immediately seemed to dislike Jim. This showed that he was not a good person. There wasn't anyone who didn't like Jim, a kind, cheerful, and totally reliable guy. He was the best partner I could ask for, and many others said the same. But this sergeant, Buster Reedon, seemed to have it out for Jim. He even tried to dock Jim's pay because he claimed his timesheets were wrong. This continued for a couple of weeks until 18 of us went to the captain to say that if Reedon didn't get transferred, we might take a day off at the same time. The captain was a good guy and had already heard complaints about Reedon. He sighed, pushed his cap back, and said he'd handle it. A week later, we heard that Reedon was moving to another precinct, and we all felt relieved. Jim was truly touched by how everyone supported him, and he set up a big bowling night one Friday at the local lanes, his treat, including snacks and drinks. We had a great time that night, bowling, having a few drinks, and joking around in the way friends do to unwind. The atmosphere was light and fun, a welcome break from the usual grind. There was a waitress who kept bringing our drinks, a friendly woman in her mid-30s SS with blonde hair and an easygoing smile. She seemed to be especially warm toward me, though I wasn't sure if that was just the drinks talking. So I asked my buddy Simon if he noticed anything. He chuckled and teased, "Oh yeah, Rob, she's into you. Just look at yourself, total charmer." He was as tipsy as I was, so I didn't take it too seriously. The next day, as I was outside raking leaves, I found myself thinking about her again. She seemed interesting, friendly, and I decided to take a chance. After cleaning up, I went back to the bowling alley that evening to see if she was working. Her name was Alice Maynard. We ended up chatting between her rounds with customers. She was cheerful, laughing easily at my jokes, though I wasn't sure if it was just part of her job. But before I left, I asked if she'd like to go out sometime for dinner and a movie. She smiled brightly and agreed. Our first date was a lot of fun, and I found her warm and easygoing. When I dropped her off, she thanked me and gave me a long, genuine hug. After our second date, we grew closer, and our time together was filled with a lot of laughter and shared stories. Alice had a lively spirit and loved to dance. She wasn't one to hold back on enjoying life, which was refreshing. Alice told me about her past. She'd had a couple of serious relationships she thought would lead to marriage, but things hadn't worked out. Her first partner had cheated, and the second left when he found out she couldn't have children. Alice had faced her share of heartbreak, but had learned from it and moved forward. Despite everything, Alice was kind and open-hearted. She appreciated being close and didn't rush things, which made our time together feel meaningful. With her, I finally found the easy companionship I had been craving, and we both enjoyed just being in each other's company. Being with Alice brought a sense of lightness to my life that I hadn't felt in a long time. She helped me find peace and joy again, one small moment at a time. She spent some time being close to me, making me feel excited. Then she would pull back for a bit and tease me with gentle touches before moving in again. After about 20 minutes of this, I was feeling overwhelmed with need, and then we finally shared an intimate moment. When I was with her, she was eager to move quickly, which was a relief for me after all the teasing. We connected deeply, and it felt amazing after all that anticipation. The next morning, she woke me up by cuddling against me, which made me feel alert again, and we shared a soft moment together, enjoying each other's warmth. For the next couple of months, we met at least twice a week, often staying overnight, whether at her place or mine. She opened up about her life, her family, and her job, and I shared stories about my past, including my work as a police officer. She liked the idea of dating someone in law enforcement, feeling safe and cared for. I was a bit older, but that didn't seem to matter to her. I once shared my worries about our age difference, and she responded playfully, saying that age is just a number, and that I felt good to her. Those first few months were filled with excitement. Getting to know someone new brought back memories of when I was first married. I wanted to explore every part of her, and we enjoyed simple moments, sharing affection and laughter. We often took our time to connect, focusing on the enjoyment of each other's presence rather than rushing. It was about savoring the experience and feeling close. What made it special wasn't just the physical connection, it was the joy we shared. I had a different kind of connection with Melinda, which was more about the thrill. But with Alice, there was a real bond. She may not have been the best cook, but her energy and positive outlook on life lifted my spirits. Despite her own struggles with past relationships and family challenges, she remained cheerful and hopeful, and I enjoyed being around her bright attitude. We also got together with our friends Jim and Patty every couple of weeks, and it was clear that they enjoyed Alice's company as well. I was in the kitchen one day, helping Patty with the dishes while Alice and Jim were outside. Patty turned to me and asked, "How's everything with Alice, Rob?" I replied that we were having a good time, and she said, "I think she's a good match for you." I glanced at her, and she smiled. "Jim thinks so too. She's smart and sweet, and she seems to really like you for some reason." "Thanks, Patty. That means a lot to me." Things were good. Alice and I made a nice couple, and I had no complaints about our time together. This went on for about 5 months. During that time, I thought about Helen less and less. She was still leaving dinners for me once a week, and I thanked her on her answering machine. We didn't see or talk to each other, but Linda and Ronnie kept me updated, telling me that Helen was doing well and her catering business was growing. Sometimes I wondered about the time Helen and I shared why I had gone to see her and what it all meant, but I didn't dwell on it, as Alice kept me busy and happy. Then Ted returned to town. Ted was Helen's ex-boyfriend. He had cheated on her, and that was years ago. He had moved away to North Carolina, but now he was back. I didn't find out right away. One Saturday night, Alice and I came back to my house after the movies. We had gone for drinks afterward, and I was feeling relaxed. I put my arm around her, ready to head upstairs, but she stopped me. "Rob, can we sit in the kitchen for a minute?" Her serious look caught my attention. We sat at the kitchen table, and she said, "I need to talk to you about something." I didn't say anything before because there wasn't much to share, but now. "Alice," I said, getting a bit impatient, "can you just tell me what's up?" I wanted to finish this quickly and go to bed. "You remember Ted, right? My ex-boyfriend?" I nodded. "I've been emailing him for a bit. He told me he was back in town and asked if I'd have lunch with him. So I thought about it, and I said okay. Last Wednesday we had lunch at the Benton Grill." I didn't like the sound of this, and I felt uneasy, sensing that we wouldn't be heading to the bedroom soon. "Okay," I said, "and—" She looked down for a moment before looking at me again. "Well, he wants to get back together. He knows he made a mistake when he cheated on me. He married his secretary, but that didn't last long before things went wrong again. He's dated others, but he says he realized I'm the one he truly loves. He got a job downtown and asked me if I could forgive him and consider giving him another chance." There was quiet. "And I'm guessing you didn't tell him to go away," I finally said. "No," she replied. "I told him I'd think about it." My expression grew tense, and she added, "Rob, listen, I care about you. You've been so good to me. The past few months have been really nice. But I don't know. I was in love with Ted. I really was. He hurt me badly. I held a lot of anger towards him for what he did. But over the years, I've thought about it a lot because I believed he was the one for me. And now he's back and wants to try again. It feels like the right choice to give it another shot. With a guy who hurt you like that?" My voice came out rough. I wasn't exactly angry, but my throat felt tight. "That's the point," she said. "I can see he's changed. It's been almost 9 years. He seems quieter, more thoughtful. He's matured since what happened." Tears filled her eyes. "Rob, I honestly don't know if this will work. It could be the craziest thing I've done, but I still feel a love for him that I've never felt for anyone else." More silence. She looked down at the table while I looked at her. "Okay," I said. "Do you want to ride home?" She looked up at me, tears on her cheeks. "Rob, I'm really sorry. I would never do this behind your back. You've been so kind to me." She didn't finish her thought and started to cry. After a moment, she said, "I know this might not go well with Ted. It could be the silliest thing I've done. But as wonderful as things have been with you, it's not. I understand, Alice. I'm not the one for you. That's fine, I said. I never thought I was. I felt sad, but I didn't want to make her feel worse. Alice was a good person, and she was being honest with me. So I drove her to her apartment slowly, being careful because of the drinks we had. She hugged me for a long time, gave me a gentle kiss, and said thank you and how sorry she was, along with a few other nice words before she went inside. I drove home alone. For a couple of weeks, I didn't date anyone or even think about it. I worked my shifts with Jim, went home to eat, watched TV, or had a couple of drinks at the bar where the officers went. Each week I found dinner waiting for me on the porch and left Helen a message the following day to say thanks. My daughter Linda called to check in and asked how Alice was doing since they had met a few times and got along well. She's okay, I guess. But she's not with me, I explained the situation. Oh, Daddy, I'm sorry. You deserve to be with someone great. I laughed. I agree, honey. I'm not upset with her. She was honest with me, and she believes this guy is her true love. After we finished our call, I returned to the game. A little later, while watching a car ad, a thought crossed my mind. And who is your true love, Rob? I knew the answer, but it didn't make me feel any better. On Tuesdays, Helen always brought me dinner. It would be waiting on the porch when I got home from work. One Monday night, Jim and I had to work late for backup on a difficult situation, and they wanted all available cars. I didn't arrive home until after 3 a.m., so the next day I left work early and took a nap. Dealing with late nights is tiring, especially for someone almost 50. I woke up around 4:30, took a shower, and got dressed. Then I went downstairs to read the paper. When I heard Helen's car stop in the driveway, I opened the front door and saw her walking up with a large bowl covered in tin foil. She looked surprised to see me. Rob, I didn't expect you. I was just... It's okay, Helen. I had a late shift last night, so I took the afternoon off. Would you like to come in for a moment? Yes, thank you. That would be nice. I held the door for her as she entered the kitchen. She looked nice. Her hair was tidy, and she wore a pretty blouse. She had a lovely scent, too. She smiled and said, I made paella with shrimp, chicken, and sausage. Sounds wonderful, I replied, taking the bowl from her and placing it on the table. Can I get you some coffee? Unlike me, Helen could enjoy coffee any time of day. For me, it would keep me awake half the night if I had it in the afternoon. Warily, she answered, Yes, thank you. I brought her a cup along with milk and sugar, remembering how she liked it. She watched me the entire time, saying nothing, just following my movements with her eyes. I wondered if this felt strange to her, us sitting in the kitchen like we used to, something we hadn't done in the last couple of years since I found out about her affair. I started talking about the kids, Linda and her latest boyfriend, Ronnie's plans after college. Gradually, she seemed to relax. Ronnie was finishing his accounting degree and wanted to move to a big city, maybe Chicago, to be near Linda, or perhaps LA or San Francisco. I thought she could make her own choices. While Helen didn't fully agree, she expressed her worry about Ronnie being alone on the West Coast. I couldn't help but keep looking at Helen while we talked about our daughters. She looked so good, and it felt strange to be sitting there together, as if our family hadn't been broken apart, as if she hadn't played a part in it. Helen, would you like to spend some time together? I asked softly, without getting up or moving closer. Her eyes widened as she looked at me, a bit uncertain. Rob, She paused. What would this mean? I shrugged. I'm not sure. Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything. I'd like to spend some time with you if you're okay with it. If not, no worries. You'll still appreciate the meal. She looked down at the table, a faint blush on her cheeks. I'd like that, Rob, she said, meeting my gaze. But can I ask you to be gentle? It's been a long time since I've been close with anyone. I nodded reassuringly. Of course. After a moment, I stood and offered her my hand. She took it, and together we walked up the stairs. In the quiet of her room, I wasn't sure what to expect. Things felt different than I'd imagined, more emotional, especially for her. She seemed a bit shy. She excused herself, went into the bathroom, and when she came back, she climbed into bed and wrapped the covers around herself. Seeing her nervousness, I approached slowly, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. I joined her, and she turned toward me, resting her head on my shoulder. We held each other quietly, the room calm as we shared small gestures and gentle closeness. As we grew more comfortable, I could sense her relax. I closed my eyes and focused on the quiet connection between us, letting the rest of the world fade away for a while. We lay back, enjoying the moment, finding warmth and comfort together in a way that felt simple yet meaningful. And I realized it had been years since I had been close with anyone in this way. Helen and I shared a quiet connection, holding each other close. But suddenly, I noticed tears in her eyes, a few slipping down her cheeks. I paused and looked at her. "Sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to, I waited, giving her a moment. Finally, she continued, "I can't stop thinking about everything I did wrong, how I hurt you, and everything I lost." She leaned against me and I wrapped my arms around her, offering quiet comfort as she released her emotions. It wasn't quite the moment I had expected, but in a way, it felt meaningful. After a little while, she calmed, sitting up to wipe her eyes. She gave me an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, Rob, I really am." We shared a few quiet moments, letting the tension settle, and eventually she rested beside me. We both relaxed, feeling the comfort of being together without any need for words. Afterward, she looked at me, a hint of hope in her eyes. "Rob, do you think we could find a way to be close again, maybe beyond just today?" I thought about it for a moment, seeing the honesty in her expression. "Helen, I think we can work on it, take things as they come, and see where we end up." Her face softened as she nodded, looking a bit relieved, and we stayed close, both realizing that sometimes just being there for each other was enough. I think it would make me very sad to know that this was the last time I'd be in your bed. I didn't want to think about what came next. It was too confusing. I pulled her close and kissed her deeply. Then I lay back, pointed at the space between us and said, "More." She smiled and leaned in again, and this time it felt even better. She seemed more relaxed and confident. It took a little longer, but I enjoyed every moment. When I was ready, I said, "I want to change things up," and she nodded. For a moment, as she moved into position, I remembered all the times she had said no, and a wave of frustration hit me. But I pushed it away, placed my hands on her waist, and we began to move together. She gasped and said, "Wow, that feels amazing." "I don't want to hurt you," I assured her, and she replied, "No, it feels great, just be gentle." So we continued, slowly and steadily. I focused on how it felt. I lost myself in the moment, aware of her soft breaths, and when I felt a wave of pleasure coming, I held her close. I may have pushed too hard for a moment, but I couldn't help it. Afterward, we turned to lie on our sides, still close, and I held her, kissing her neck as we relaxed together. Has it really been 2 years? After resting for a while, we found ourselves in the kitchen. Helen was heating up some paella and making a salad, while I set the table and grabbed a beer. "Yes, the last person I was with after you was not a good memory. I'm glad I have a better one now." She smiled at me and I smiled back. "I can't believe you haven't had more chances," I said. "You're a lovely lady. Have you not been dating at all?" "Not in the beginning. I was too troubled. Sometimes people would ask, but I was too busy working and seeing my doctor trying to get my life back on track. I did date a couple of guys briefly, but being close with them felt significant, and I just wasn't ready for that. They were nice, but there was no real connection. And having a casual relationship with someone I didn't care about wasn't very interesting to me. We had dinner and talked about the girls and a bit about work. I made Helen laugh by sharing the story of how we supported Jim and got Buster Reedon removed from the place. She mentioned that the catering business had gained a few regular clients, small conference centers that provided lots of steady work, and she was making more money than ever. I even thought about buying a house, but her voice trailed off. "But what?" I asked. I realized that what I really wanted was a home, not just a house. Buying a house wouldn't make it feel like a home, especially if I was by myself. I didn't have anything to respond, so I let it go. My time with Helen had been interesting. It felt mostly comfortable, familiar, and nice. We knew each other quite well. There were a few brief moments when memories of the past filled me with anger, like a surge of electricity. However, after 2 years, those feelings didn't linger long. Nothing can hurt as much after a while, no matter how deep the pain was at first. I still remember the sadness when my dad suddenly passed away from a heart attack in the cafeteria at his workplace. I was only 24. I can recall the feelings, but they don't hurt the same now. I loved him and miss him, of course, but it lacks that sharp pain and the flood of tears. He's gone. That's all there is to it. I suppose it's the same with my marriage. When Helen left, we both steered clear of talking about what had happened or what might come next. The closest we got was at the door when she hugged me. She whispered, "Thanks, Rob. I enjoyed that." Almost like she was afraid to say it out loud. I smiled, kissed her, and replied, "Me too," as she walked to her car without looking back. I could tell she wanted to ask, "What now?" but wisely chose not to push it. I grabbed a beer, settled into the living room, and turned on the game. I didn't want to think about what now either. I was just finishing the dinner dishes on Friday when Ronnie called from school. This was normal. We talked every week or so, but I felt a bit uneasy. My first thought was, oh no, Helen told her about our meeting, didn't she? Not the personal part, but something. But Ronnie didn't mention anything about it. She just talked about her classes, looking forward to graduation, sending out her resume, and other things on her mind. She also asked about Alice and if I was missing her. Carefully, I said, "So what do you hear from your mom?" "Oh, she's okay, I guess. She still really likes her job. I wish she'd get out more, Dad, you know? I mean, she knows she won't be with you, but she doesn't seem interested in dating anyone else." The conversation drifted on, and I felt relieved. I had somehow thought Helen would tell others, and the idea bothered me, so it was a relief to know that wasn't happening. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about Helen often, at random times when I wasn't too busy. Spending time with her had been nice, and having her around the house was more enjoyable than I'd expected, so on Tuesday afternoon I decided to call her at work. "Hi, Helen, it's Rob." There was a brief pause, then she responded, "Oh, hi, Rob. How are you? I didn't expect you to call." She sounded happy to hear from me. "Yeah, well, I thought you might be dropping off some food today. Why don't you come a bit later and we can have dinner together? I can be home around 5:30 or so." "That sounds wonderful," she replied. "I have a shepherd's pie ready, and I'll make a quick salad before I head over." We chatted for a minute before hanging up, and I realized I was genuinely looking forward to seeing her, not just for the food. I left work a little early to get home before Helen arrived. I set the table and tidied up the kitchen before the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, she looked nice, not dressed up, but her hair was styled, and she looked happy to be there. Having a beer, want anything?" I asked as we brought the food to the kitchen. "A Diet Coke, please, if you have one." I poured her a glass, and we shared a quiet toast, both smiling. She started telling me a funny story about a mix-up at work involving her friend Gloria and some salads. I wasn't fully paying attention, more focused on watching her and noticing the familiar expressions and gestures I remembered so well. Without saying anything, I stepped closer, took the glass from her hand, and gently held her in my arms, giving her a soft kiss. Helen looked surprised, but didn't pull away. We stood there, close and silent, just enjoying the moment together. When I pulled back slightly, her cheeks were flushed. She seemed about to say something, but I gave her a reassuring smile, and she looked at me, her expression warm and open. We shared a quiet moment, both feeling the comfort of the familiar, enjoying each other's company in a way that felt natural and unhurried. After a moment, her face softened, and she placed her hands in my hair, pulling me closer for another gentle kiss. We stood there quietly, wrapped in each other's embrace, sharing a rare moment of closeness. As her breathing quickened, I noticed her excitement, but instead of rushing, we kept things tender and simple. I could feel her warmth as we enjoyed this quiet connection, taking a break from the outside world to simply be together. Without a word, we shared these moments, just happy to be in each other's presence. We laughed softly at times, recalling shared memories and letting the mood stay light and comfortable. Eventually, I helped her up to sit on the counter, where we continued to share more moments of closeness, laughing together as I reminded her of the fun we used to have. She smiled, her eyes sparkling with a warmth I hadn't seen in a long time, and we simply stayed close, grateful for the quiet comfort of being together again. As we lingered there, it was clear we were both content to let time slow down, sharing a simple yet meaningful moment without any rush. It was a reminder of how easy things could feel when we both let down our guards and enjoyed the little things. Without a word, I lifted her gently and carried her into the living room, where I set her down on the soft rug. We held each other closely, sharing a quiet moment of closeness and warmth, with a sense of excitement and energy filling the room. Laying together, we laughed and talked softly, enjoying each other's company in a relaxed and comfortable way. We spent time just being close, sharing stories and small gestures, feeling at ease in each other's presence. It was simple but felt special, as if we were reconnecting in a way we hadn't done in a long time. After a while, we lay side by side, resting in peaceful silence. She gave me gentle kisses on my cheek, and we both closed our eyes, simply relaxing together. After a time, she smiled and asked if I'd join her upstairs. We went up to the bedroom, where she kindly suggested I lie down and relax. She began giving me a soothing massage, gently working on my shoulders and back, easing away any tension. I closed my eyes, letting her calm and caring touch relax me completely. She took her time, moving down my arms and back, letting the quiet atmosphere work its magic. As she continued, she focused on different areas, making sure I felt fully at ease. It was a peaceful, thoughtful gesture, and I appreciated her care and attention. We stayed like that for a while, enjoying the calm and quiet together. There was no need for words. The comfort and connection were enough, creating a moment that felt warm and genuine. After some time, I began to feel restless, shifting slightly as I lay there. Helen could sense my energy, so she gently rolled me onto my back with a soft smile. She leaned down to give me a quick, light kiss, her eyes bright with warmth. When we settled again, we held each other quietly, enjoying the closeness. Helen rested her head on my shoulder, but kept looking at me with a thoughtful expression. After a moment, she spoke. "What we shared just now, that was something I wanted to give to you. It wasn't something I learned from anyone else. It just felt right." Her words surprised me, but I could see she was sincere. I smiled at her, feeling a sense of ease between us, and she looked happy, relieved even. We shared a soft, comforting kiss, then lay together peacefully, drifting off to rest. Over the next few weeks, our quiet Tuesdays together became a routine. Helen would bring over dinner, wed talk, enjoy each other's company, and then she'd head home. Neither of us talked about what it all meant, and we both seemed content to let things be. One Saturday, I saw a movie that I thought she'd enjoy, so I called and asked if she wanted to go. She happily agreed, and we met up for a quick meal at a diner we used to visit, followed by the movie. Afterward, she came back to my place and decided to stay the night. We took our time that evening, sharing laughs and enjoying a relaxed closeness, moving at a slower pace. After years of keeping each other at a distance, it felt good to reconnect without any hurry or pressure. We appreciated each other's company, and I started to feel more comfortable with our new rhythm. For the first time in a long while, I realized that simply being together, sharing small moments, and enjoying each other's presence was enough. It was a slow, natural adjustment for both of us, but over time, we grew more at ease with the closeness we'd rediscovered. Then at the end, I turned her around, and we connected in a way that felt intense and meaningful. Helen didn't always seem to have those moments of deep pleasure, but she was always happy and relaxed after we were together, grateful even. We cuddled and she showered me with kisses on my neck and face, but we stayed away from any overly sweet words. I wasn't sure if I felt that way, and I think she was wise enough not to say those things even if she did feel them. The next morning she woke me up in a playful way. We spent time together, made breakfast, and then enjoyed some more moments before she headed home. That left me pretty worn out for the rest of Sunday. It had been more than 6 weeks since Helen and I started seeing each other again, and I hadn't told anyone about it, not even Jim. But the next time he and Patty invited me over to dinner, I felt it was too strange to keep it a secret. "Can I share something surprising?" I asked them while we sipped our coffee. "You guys are my most sensible friends, and I want to know what you think." With a serious expression, Jim said, "You're coming out about something, Rob? Patty and I have suspected it for a while. We just wondered when you'd bring it up." I didn't smile. I just told him, "You figured me out, Jim. The truth is, I'd like to keep things fresh. and it has to do with my connection with Helen. For some reason, I hesitated to spill the details. I've actually been seeing Helen again. She's been bringing me meals once a week and leaving them for me. Did you guys know about that? They nodded, looking a bit surprised, and I continued. To be honest, I don't know what's going on. After everything, I didn't expect to be enjoying my time with Helen. I guess I should still be upset with her, but I'm having fun. Patty squeezed my hand. Wow, she said. I didn't see that coming, Rob. I don't think about Helen much, but when I do, I'm often frustrated with her for what happened. But you should do what makes you happy. If being with Helen feels good, then definitely keep seeing her. Jim sat there looking thoughtful. Finally, he nodded and said, I agree, Rob. My loyalty is to you. As long as you're enjoying yourself and she's not causing you pain, I say go for it. We chatted a bit longer, and then Patty asked, Do you think you two might get back together? I really can't say. I can't imagine marrying her again, that's for sure. Been there, done that. But then again, I just don't know. She cooks really well, you know, and I'm enjoying the comfort of having her around. We know each other deeply and get along nicely. All that good marriage stuff that I used to value when our relationship was driving me a bit crazy. I guess I really don't know. I've thought a few times about having her move back in, but I keep hesitating. So I guess I'm not ready for that yet. We talked for a while longer, and when I was leaving, Patty brought it up again. Whatever you decide, Rob, it should be what you want. You deserve to be happy, whether it's with or without Helen. Just take your time with it. She surprised me with a warm hug and whispered, We both care about you, Rob. Thanks, Patty. I feel the same way about you and Jim. I was sitting in the precinct, filling out some paperwork on a burglary case, when Alice walked in. She looked wonderful, happy, and healthy. Could you buy a girl a cup of coffee? She asked. I stood up and hugged her. This is a nice surprise. I'll do better than that. I'm off to lunch in 5 minutes, and if you're nice to me, I might buy you a sandwich. We had Greek salads and coffee at Angelo's. I was trying to watch my weight since my uniform was feeling a little tight lately, and I listened as Alice shared how she was doing. My first impression was right, things were going well with her old boyfriend. Ted has really changed, you know, she said. I had my doubts at first, and we've been taking it slow. But he's really thoughtful and considerate, and it's been wonderful. Then her expression shifted from a big smile to uncertainty. She reached out and placed her hand on my arm. I'm really sorry, Rob. Maybe I'm being selfish talking about him like this. No, Alice, it's fine. I smiled at her. Really, I'm happy for you. You didn't know if it would work out, but you needed to find out, and it is working out. That's great. She looked relieved. I'm glad you feel that way, Rob. You've always been so good to me. Can we still be friends? Of course, I said, wondering what that would really mean. Well then, she smiled again. Can I share a little secret? We're engaged. I congratulated her and asked, How did he ask you? I was genuinely happy for her, even if I wasn't super interested in every detail. But I listened attentively and responded with excitement at the right moments. After we said goodbye with another hug and more congratulations, I went back into Angelo's and treated myself to more coffee and a piece of cherry pie. How did I feel about Alice's news? Surprisingly, I wasn't very upset. We had a good time together, but we never really fell in love, at least not like young people often do. I think we could have ended up together, maybe even married or living together, and it could have been nice. But then, I realized I hadn't really missed her much, not after the first couple of weeks. I thought about her sometimes and remembered the fun we had. I also missed being close with someone until I started seeing Helen again. But I didn't truly miss Alice, and it was silly to make this seem bigger than it really was. So I finished my pie and went back to my work. I can't say it was a bad day. It was just like closing a door, finishing a chapter. Hey, everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.